everyone! This video is going to be all about how you can create your very own custom bow. And this technique is so great because you can use it for so many purposes. You can upgrade your gift wrapping, you can add these bows to garlands or wreaths or Christmas tree, perhaps as part of your tree topper. You can decorate the backs of chairs and probably so many other creative things that people can come up with. But creating custom bows really isn't that hard once you know what you're doing. It just takes a little bit of patience and finger dexterity. So I'm actually going to walk you through creating two different bows. The first is going to be just a simple one ribbon bow, so you can see very simply what the technique looks like. Then I am going to create a multi-ribbon bow similar to this, so you can know how you can really take that bow making skill and take it up to the next level. But before we get started, for those of you that are new to my channel, hi, my name is Catherine, and I absolutely love decorating for the holidays. I also love fashion and beauty. So if you happen to love any, or maybe even all of those topics, then I hope you'll consider subscribing. But let's go ahead and get started with the list of supplies that we're going to need. So first off is obviously the ribbon that you want to use for your bow. And for ribbon, really the main thing is it's best to find wired ribbon. And what that means is there's actually a wire in the edge. So for instance, if you pinch it, it stays. This is going to make the bow look the best when it comes to fluffing. The next is a good pair of sharp scissors. I actually recommend keeping a pair of scissors explicitly for things like cutting ribbon, using for gift wrap, that don't get used for other things that might dull or nick the blades. That's just going to ensure that when you've got a clump of ribbon that you've made into a loose bow over here, and you might need to cut a tail, that you can do it very easily one-handed. Then you need something to tie off the bow, and for this you can use a variety of materials. For instance, you can actually use more of the same ribbon. This is something that I do a lot of times when I'm adding a bow onto a gift wrapped package. If I'm not doing that though, then a lot of times I'll use something like these. So this is actually a pipe cleaner. So it's very similar to using wire, like floral wire, but it's covered in that soft chenille. So it makes it a lot easier to use, a lot more comfortable on the fingers, and they come in a variety of colors, so you can typically find something that's going to blend with your ribbon, and they're very inexpensive. Alternately, you could use floral wire as well. The other thing that I really like to use are zip ties, especially when I'm making bows that I want to last for a really long time, or perhaps really heavy duty bows that have got a lot of ribbon, you know, the center of it is really big, either because of the thickness, the number of loops I've made, etc. So these can be really helpful for that. And when I use zip ties, then I'll also need a couple of extra supplies, which are a pair of pliers to be able to pull that zip tie super tight, and then just wire cutters so I can snip off the end of that zip tie. So that's all we need. Let's go ahead and get started with the very first bow using one ribbon. Here's the ribbon that I'm going to be using for my simple one ribbon bow. And it's about, I think, a 2.5 inch wide ribbon. Of course, your ribbon can be whatever width that you would like. The bigger the width though, the harder it gets, so just keep that in mind. But this is a very typical size that I would use for making a bow for a gift wrapped package. And actually that's what this is. This is ribbon that I do use to add to gift wrap. So the first thing I need to do, well, at least after I've selected the ribbon that I'm going to use, is I need to think through what purpose I'm going to use this for, and that'll help me determine how big I want to make the loops and how many loops that I want to have. So typically for gift wrap, I'm going to make the loops maybe 3 to 4 inches. That's a good size to go on a lot of like t-shirt or sweater size boxes. And I'll make 9 loops because that's just a good fullness for that purpose. What I'll make in a little while will be a lot bigger and have a lot more loops than that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my ribbon, and I'm going to think about how long I want the tail to be. So I've got this end that's been folded over that I'll cut off at the very end, but I probably want my tail to maybe be about that long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn the ribbon upside down, so the inside of the ribbon or bottom of the ribbon is facing up towards me. Now if your ribbon is the same on both sides, this doesn't matter, but most ribbon is one-sided, and so that's why this does matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch off where basically the end of that tail is, and this ends up becoming the center of the bow. I'm going to pinch that off between my thumb, forefinger, and middle finger. And then I'm going to take the ribbon and I'm going to create a loop. And now, because it's come back over, the top or the outside of the ribbon is facing out, and I'm going to just add that in between my fingers. And we'll go ahead and make this about the size of the loop. Now, when I get to my finger here, this is a very important part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a half twist so that the ribbon is now, once again, the inside or bottom of the ribbon is facing up, so that once I come back around with my next loop, once again, it comes back around so the right side of the ribbon is facing out. Now at this point, I've put it back, I gathered it in the middle and put it between my fingers, and I want to just measure my loops. So you can see here that the second loop is a little bit bigger than the first. I don't want that. For this, I want to keep the loops relatively even. And so I'll just kind of check it like that. So there we go. Okay, so now I've got 2 loops. Once again, I'm going to do that half turn of the ribbon, and then I'm going to create my 3rd loop. And it's basically the same thing over and over. Once again, kind of measuring off to see the loop, to see the size of my loops, because in this case, I do want to keep them even. So basically what I'm doing is I'm building from the bottom up with this bow. You could make the loops a little bit smaller as you go up. Sometimes that's a nice look, especially for a bow that's going to kind of lay flat on something. But, you know, for this, I'm not going to bother. Now, once again, I'm going to twist that half turn so I can create my 4th loop. Just gathering between my fingers as I go. And this is where it starts to take a little bit of finger dexterity, because the more loops you create, the more you're holding in the middle. And so if you don't have a lot of practice with this, it can feel a little strained holding all of this in the middle of your fingers, but you do get used to it after you've done it a few times. And I'm just going to complete this out 4 more times so that I've got 8 loops, and then we'll talk about the last one. All right, I've now got my 8 loops, and I could tie this off here and it would make a beautiful bow, but because I am going to put it on something flat, then I do want it to have kind of a nice rounded look. So I'm going to add 1 more loop, and this is going to be the center of the bow, and I will make this one just slightly smaller than the other ones. So I'll add this one in, and see, it's a little bit shorter. So I've got that. And now I'm just gonna kind of gather things from, you know, each side so it's easy for me to get to the middle. I'm gonna take what I'm using to tie off my bow. For this one, it is gonna be my pipe cleaner. And this is where you need a little finger dexterity once again. I'm gonna lay the pipe cleaner right where my thumb was, kind of flip it over, and then a lot of times at this point, I just very quickly kind of smush it down on the table. And the great thing about the pipe cleaner is I don't have to technically tie it. I can just pull it really tight, and then I can twist it around. And this will hold, so I don't have to try to slip a loop in there or anything like that. So now I've got it tied off. So the next thing I need to do is cut the ribbon. And what I want to do is figure out how long I want the tail. So I'm going to compare it to the other side, the other tail, and I'm going to cut at about the same spot, remembering that I'm going to cut this piece off where it was folded. And I don't have to be too precise with cutting the ribbon, because I don't want to leave this raw edge. The next thing that I'm going to do is actually finish off the tails to look a little nicer. So you could do a variety of techniques. The typical one that I do is create a fishtail. So I fold the ribbon in half, and I take my scissors and I start at the outside edge, and I go up at about a 45-degree angle, And because I've got it folded over, it creates this nice fishtail. And I'm going to do that on the other side. And I've got my other fishtail. So here's the bow. Doesn't look fabulous yet, but don't worry. Now we are just going to start fluffing. So for this, you just want to basically spread out the loops and kind of help them stand up a bit. And I'll kind of maneuver my smaller loop a little bit in the middle to cover up where we tied it off. And there is our simple bow using one ribbon. If the simple bow is bow making 101, let's move on to the advanced course 201. So what we're going to be making is basically another one of these bows. So you can see I've got 4 different ribbons here. I've also got a lot of loops. I've got ribbons in different widths, different thicknesses, so there's a lot going on. Now this is the kind of bow that I make for my tree toppers. This is definitely a more complicated bow to make for a few different reasons. So because this is not going to be laying flat on something, I create this one in a little bit different way. I want this to integrate with the 3 other bows that I'm going to make just like this, so that it looks like one continuous ring around kind of the base of that tree topper. Therefore, it doesn't really have a center. I don't want it to have a center. So I've got my 4 ribbons laid out in front of me. And for this one, I'm going to actually create a 16 loop bow using 4 loops from each ribbon. But because I don't have that center like I mentioned a minute ago, I'm going to alternate the ribbon so that I do 2 loops of each ribbon and then come back and do the next 2 loops starting with the first ribbon again so that the loops stay interspersed. You don't have to do it that way, but the loops won't look as interspersed. It's a lot easier though if you just deal with 1 ribbon at a time and do all the loops you want out of that ribbon before you move on to the next one. So I don't know, maybe this is bow making 301 because of that. So I'm going to start with the widest ribbon. That's just typically what I do. So I've actually got 2 ribbons here that are 4 inches a piece, and then the other 2 I believe are 3 inches. So it starts off very much the same way. I'm going to determine how long I want my tail to be. So I want the tail to be pretty long because I want you to be able to see the tails and them not get completely lost in the size of those loops. So I'm going to make the tail probably about this big. I'm going to gather in my finger and I'm going to create that first loop with having my ribbon upside down. And you can see this is a very long loop. So I've gathered it in between my fingers and I'm going to create 1 more loop before I move on to the next ribbon. So I've given it the half twist. So this is the bottom side of the ribbon. And I'm going to come over and pinch once again. Check the length. I did a pretty good job there. I'm going to go ahead and give it its half twist. And now I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to move on to my next ribbon. So this is what really makes this hard because this is a thick ribbon. So I'm going to come and I'm going to just basically act like I'm starting all over on the bow, except I've already got 2 loops here. And I'm going to just once again put that in upside down and I'm going to create my 2 loops. About the same, twist, about the same, twist. Okay, now we're going to be adding in our 3rd ribbon. And for this, I'm using this herringbone. You'll notice that all of my ribbons are very complementary colors, but they are different sizes, different textures, and a little bit different patterns and colors to give this some interest. Okay, so I've got my tail, create my 2 loops. And now I'm moving on to my very last ribbon that I'm adding. And this one actually doesn't have an inside or an outside, but I'm still gonna follow the same technique because that twisting also helps serve the purpose of kind of gathering it a little bit better. Okay, at this point I have got 2 loops each of my 4 different ribbons, so 8 loops, so I'm about halfway there. Now, my hand has become a complete claw trying to hold all of this together. So this is definitely where I wouldn't start trying to make bows quite like this. So now we're basically going to repeat the process by starting over with our first ribbon again. So another thing that makes this a little hard is this is still attached to the bow. I could cut it off to make it a little bit easier, but that's going to give me a lot of extra tails, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to leave it attached. So I'm going to need to move this one back under, because I'm going to come back just like I would have if this was the next loop that I was going to be making. It just happens to be with a different ribbon than I used last. So I'm going to come back basically to the same spot, continuing to check the length of these loops, get to the middle, twist the half turn, throw that one over there, half turn. Okay, plaid ribbon, done with that for now. Come back under with my birch. Same thing. I'm kind of forcing where I left that to come back over to the center. Half turn. Half turn. Move that one out of the way. And I'll just finish this out now with my last 2 ribbons. All right, now I've got my big heaping mess, and this is one where I'm going to use a zip tie. 1, because this is something I plan to use year after year for my tree topper, but 2, because this is such a big center that something really secure like a zip tie is going to be the best way to keep it all together. So I'm going to try to find all the way around this, thread the zip tie around, and then the great thing about the zip tie, you just need to find that hole. And this is going to be kind of the center that faces out from the tree. So as I'm doing this, I want to kind of rotate this so that the zip tie kind of faces to the back. It's not a huge deal because it really shouldn't be seen. Okay, so I'm going to start putting that through. I'm going to pull as tight as I can. So I've now rotated the tail of the zip tie back here. Now I'm going to kind of put this down. Okay, so I've got that pretty tight. Now I'm going to take my pliers, and here's where these are going to help me be able to pull this much tighter than just doing it with my hands ever could. Okay, I've got the zip tie on. Now I'm going to take my wire cutters, and I'm just going to snip down close to the base. Got our loops, got it tied. Now I'm just going to cut each of these off. Once again, kind of keeping in mind the length that I'd made the other tails. Basically, I want them about the same length as the loops, maybe a little longer. I'm not getting too technical here. Now I just need to finish off the ends of the tails and fluff. So similarly, I'm going to finish these off by fishtailing them, but there are a lot of other cool ways that you can finish off tails. For instance, one thing that you can do is, if I had cut these longer, you can actually roll the tail up and then kind of stick your finger in and grab an edge, and then you can kind of pull that out and you get this neat end that looks like that. That can be really pretty on maybe a more sophisticated tree or a more whimsical tree, but I'm just gonna fishtail. We got all of the tails cut, so now it is just time to fluff. And so for this, I'm just going to kind of wrangle the ribbons around until I get them in a way that I like. And this is where if I had not alternated the ribbons, I would have a harder time getting them to look a little more random throughout. So made it harder to make the bow, but makes it easier to fluff. All right, so there is the bow all fluffed. Now, obviously, when I get ready to actually put it on the tree, I'm gonna end up refluffing it. So this is just really to give you an idea of how it looks. And as a matter of fact, here are the two now that I've made. And so they're gonna end up kind of going next to each other like this. And then I'm gonna have two more on the back side that's gonna wrap around the tree. So that can just give you an idea of how it's gonna integrate. So it all will end up looking almost like one really big bow, except it's really gonna be 4 separate ones. All right, so there you have the bow making 101, 201, and maybe even a little bit of 301 all in one video. Hopefully you now feel confident to be able to go and make your own bows. And if you already knew how to make bows, then maybe you picked up some of your own tips and tricks. By the way, I'd love to know, what do you like to use custom bows for? Or if you've not done it before, what do you plan on using them for this season? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. If you did find this video helpful, it would be so appreciated if you'd go ahead and leave a thumbs up. That helps YouTube know that this is a worthwhile video that they should share with other people as well. And for those of you that are still here at the end, here's a little sneak peek of what my updated 12-foot Christmas tree is going to look like. And I will have a video on it coming out soon. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.